Hey, what's up you guys? Hey, it's Kevin again out here in Portland, Oregon with Pedal PT. Again, Kevin Schmidt, physical therapist, bike fitter. Want to get on here today. Let's talk a little bit about indoor bike training. Had one of our subscribers or commenters mentioned something along the lines that they had some questions about indoor bike training, and there are definitely some things that we will tend to see, symptoms that we'll tend to get more from a bike trainer, more so than actually riding on the road. So let's take some time today. Let's discuss that. Before we get into that, also, if you're new to the channel, please click like and subscribe. It helps us out a lot. I think we are currently over 700 subscribers, which is fantastic. So let's keep this going. Again, it's your questions that keep this channel going. So if you've got questions, drop them below. Maybe the next video will be about your questions. So anyway, let's talk about indoor bike trainers. In general, bike trainers, you'll usually have a couple different versions. You'll usually have either A, something that's kind of you take your bike and you install it in a bike trainer. Sometimes the rear wheel, kind of you can fit it into the axle. Sometimes you'll take off the rear wheel and then kind of attach it to a trainer that way with a cassette on the back. Regardless, it's basically turning your current bike into a stationary bike. That's kind of one option that you have. The other side of that is these like Peloton, Zwift bikes, different bikes that are kind of like a set aside bike that is designed for being on the trainer, or kind of has mechanisms and things that allow you to tap in to do some online or indoor training. So for the purpose of this video, let's talk about the bike trainers that we usually will just use the same bike that we ride outdoors as we ride indoors. So one of those type of stationary trainers. So oftentimes people will say, I can ride this bike all day long outside, but when I go onto the indoor bike trainer, my symptoms kind of go through the roof. I'm starting to get, tingling and numbness. I'm starting to get saddle sores. My wrists are getting sore. What's going on with that? So let's take some time today and kind of unpack a lot of that. So the first thing that we'll talk about when you are putting your bike into a stationary trainer, this may seem very obvious, but that is a very stationary position. What I mean by that is when that bike is locked in that trainer, a lot of times does not have a lot of the natural side to side that we'll usually get when we're pedaling outside. When that happens and the bike can't shift or lean or perhaps even provide some suspension from the tires themselves, we tend to kind of lose a little bit of that side to side. So therefore it's just much more taxing kind of on the lower back, generally more taxing to the knees, sometimes more taxing to that saddle area as well. So sometimes little bike fit things in the bike fit that we probably should adjust, or maybe that don't cause symptoms outside, sometimes can then trigger them if we're indoors because of that lack of motion as well. With that said, when we're setting up the bike indoors, you also want to make sure that the bike is level. Oftentimes, sometimes we'll have like a wheel riser or something in the front that kind of lifts the front wheel up. Now, if your wheel is not straight, or let's say that your saddle is your front end is nose down, so the front end is a little bit lower, so it causes more of a forward tilt in that saddle. That will also cause you to be sliding forward. That'll also put a lot more pressure to the hands. So oftentimes when we say get your bike set up on the trainer, easiest way to make sure that your bike is level is go out to your garage or whatever and find yourself a little carpenter's level like this. What you'll then do is you'll put this on the axles of the bike. So usually in the front and in the back, and then you'll use the bubble level in the middle. That'll just allow you to make sure that the bike is level. Oftentimes people will look at this and it's way off, or the bike is not level at all. So if we're gonna spend some time, an hour or two or more on that indoor bike trainer and the bike is not level, that is a recipe for trouble right away there, guys. So if you're getting weird saddle pains, pressure to hands, double check to make sure that the bike is level on that surface. That would just be number one. So number one, the bike is stationary. Okay, number two, oftentimes when we're riding that bike and riding that trainer, we don't have, I learned this new term today, they were calling it micro recovery. Micro recovery means that when we are on the trainer, oftentimes we do not have a brake built in there. What I mean by that is we're not braking, we're not steering, we're not coasting downhill, we're not steering. So what that does is it allows us to just sit on that bike and just hammer away. So we'll constantly be pedaling. A lot of times you're trying to hit certain type of wattages or certain type of power segments. But because of that fact, we're never getting a micro recovery. Therefore, symptoms a lot of times will tease out faster just because we aren't coasting, we're not braking, we're not shifting, we're just putting our head down and just pedaling, pedaling, pedaling. So oftentimes those symptoms that do occur, whether that be low back pain, saddle pain, knee pain, ankle pain, Achilles pain, a lot of that stuff can kind of be teased out faster because we're just doing more repetition with less rest, recovery, coasting, steering, that sort of thing as well. So that's just kind of something to think about too when we've got that. I did leave myself some notes over here, so let me just double check here. I talked about that. Great. Yeah. Yeah, just more time pedaling with less recovery. So you don't think about that on the trainer, but when you don't have to worry about traffic around you, you don't have to worry about stoplights or stop signs. There is just nothing other than just pedaling, pedaling, pedaling. And with that, repetition can lead then to, overuse injuries, stress injuries to more of those tendons, ligaments, muscles, that sort of thing as well. Okay. So number 3 is usually most people that are going to ride on the trainer, then you're going to use some sort of indoor training service like Zwift, things of that nature, where you're trying to hit power numbers and things of that nature. So because of that fact, and because we're indoors, we've got no traffic around us, oftentimes we will tend to sometimes choose to pedal a lot higher torque, especially seated, than we normally would do on the road. The more that we're kind of applying or putting more, greater torque, which means lower cadence, the lower cadence, higher torque is just putting more peak torque or more peak forces through all the joints of our body. So it's kind of like more stress through the tendons, all through the ligaments. That's, like I said, the knees, the ankles, the hips, even neck, upper back, all that stuff is putting much more torque whenever we pedal a much lower cadence. The idea is also just keep track of that cadence. So if you start to feel like you're dropping below, 60 RPMs, that's kind of a recipe sometimes that can lead to injury because we're just pushing at high torque for a period of time. And just like any kind of repetitive thing, if we are cranking out massive peak torque per pedal stroke, just greater chance of injury occurring. So the tendinitises and things of that can be really common too. So take a look at that. It's also just, some people would say, I don't do a lot of indoor training personally myself, but a lot of people that use some of these settings called erg settings, sometimes it just doesn't kind of feel natural. It makes the entire pedal stroke resistant to the entire pedal stroke versus just the kind of the power phase of that. So sometimes that can kind of make the pedaling feel a little bit stickier. And again, with that lower cadence, high torque, you're just kind of risking your chance of injury with that. And that can be, much more common when we're there, especially sitting on an indoor trainer. Again, we've got nobody around us. We don't have to look for cars or anything like that. We'll also tend to choose to pick a harder gear. And lastly is we don't stand up on the pedals. Some folks do, but again, if you've got a stationary trainer and you stand up on it, the bike can't kind of move side to side like that. So it's a little awkward standing up on the pedals on a bike that doesn't move. When we stand up on the pedals, that does kind of disperse a little bit of force. We're using a little bit of our gravity to kind of help drive that bike. So if we stay seated, locked in one position again, that can lead to kind of those symptoms too. So those are just some kind of generalized idea about the stationary trainers. And oftentimes we do see a lot of folks that are getting pain on the trainer, but not so much on the road. So those are kind of some of those factors that we'll look at, is that the bike is locked down. We'll tend to choose to pedal a little bit harder gear. Maybe our posture, sometimes we'll slouch a little bit more. Sometimes we're watching TV, you're not really paying attention. You're just kind of keeping that cadence go. So sometimes you can get those symptoms from that. So anyway, if that makes sense to you, try those out, double check those, make sure the bike is level. Of course, all the bike fit symptoms that we tend to see in all our other videos can apply to the trainer. And maybe that comes on sooner just because we're probably doing more repetitions in a shorter period of time too. So review those videos as well. If you've got any specific questions about the trainer, please drop those in the comments below as well. Otherwise, thanks again for tuning in. Keep those questions going and we'll go from there. And otherwise, again, Kevin Schmidt, physical therapist, bike fitter out here in Pedal PT in Portland, Oregon. Have a great day. See ya.